everyone, whoever is watching in this video and the recording. Today we're talking about male loneliness epidemic. Welcome to the stream. Welcome to today's video. And I made the subtitle here, The Many Victims of a Myth. From the perspective of Tantra coach, Tantra therapist, this issue is brightly seen specifically as the consequence of a myth, as the consequence of developing some synthetic perception of self, developing some synthetic idea of what male, female, man, woman represent, and what boundaries they should have in life, what choices they should have, what choices they should be making. It's a part of the myth that propagates because people develop a habit, survival-driven habit, to look at the possibilities in life through very, very narrow lens. So it is a myth that gets carried over through generations, and that somehow becomes very appealing cave or tunnel for vulnerable people who willingly accept the notion of how they should appear, what they should be feeling, what they should be doing in life. If we look at the widely abundant members and movements such as the red pill or black pill, they are a very good example of building a myth of masculinity and femininity. And when people start leaning on this myth to drive their life decisions, to develop the concept of self through this lens, then it is not surprising that it leads to some seclusion, inability to get in touch, get in contact with the actual reality, touch the grass, so to speak. Another big phenomenon that contributes to loneliness epidemic, that contributes to lack of understanding in general how to build relationships, is also this absolutely stupid idea of men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Male loneliness epidemic is not just loneliness in terms of interpersonal, intimate relationships, or masculine-feminine relationships, or if we think about people with different gender identities, of course, there will be some other appropriate labels, but it's not just that. It's also an ability to build relationships with, such as friendships. It just seems like it became very difficult. And as a Tantra coach, Tantra therapist, I would also like to highlight the other side of the problem that makes this phenomenon instrumentally possible. And that is inability to manage life in the ever-changing world under pressure, because a lot of people live in this narrow, dark tunnel in which they are not capable of accessing themselves, disconnect from their senses, and that creates a very drained individual, that creates a very drained human that is in general not lacking energy to operate outside of the basic survival. And nowadays, basic survival in the Western world, in the developed West, is hardly relying on the community. Also owing to a very abstract, very hierarchy-driven economical system in which human exchange is all submitted to the production speeds. And I worked in the academia, I worked in the industry, and I know what it is. I know what it is when there is some dehumanization. when human in general is only valuable in the society as a manufacturing unit, as the production unit. And that also causes this crisis of human self identity and self worth in general. When human self esteem is determined by the net worth, when human self esteem is determined by how much a human can produce, when human is encouraged to look at themselves through the lens of how much goodness or monetary equivalent of goodness they're bringing to the society. What is left of human identity? And how can we actually build close relationships when there is such a wave of dehumanization and at the same time the narrative, the enticing image of success that people are striving to achieve at an expense of their vitality, oftentimes. So let me close the curtains and we'll start drawing the diagrams. So, hello, Joshua. So let's look at the reasons that lead to this problem. The first reason here would be almost didn't recognize you, James Miller. The myth of gender roles. Mars, Venus, all of that bullshit. Economy and depreciating human worth. Low level of vitality. Self-identity crisis. So these are the reasons that I can bring up the top of my head. You're not lonely. I'm very happy, Joshua. That's very good. As a Tantra coach, I oftentimes in my live streams, I often encounter men who are lonely and who are struggling, like openly suffering from the lack of social connections. Not just even intimate relationships with women, or for gay men, it would be males, but I rarely get such audience. It's social connection, social relationships as a whole that become a huge void in people's lives. Thank you so much, RC Star. Thank you. So the reasons, the myth of gender roles, Mars's, Venus's, emphasizing the striking differences between men and women. That's one thing that as a Tantra coach I would like to address as one of the contributing factors to the loneliness epidemic. And of course, I would also like to emphasize that loneliness epidemic is not just male, female. Male loneliness epidemic is just something that's being talked about a lot. But in reality, it is more class dependent. It is more but the fact that it's being talked about in the context of male loneliness epidemic emphasizes to me that the myth that was driving people for the past several centuries is probably quite outdated. So another point that I added here is myth of femininity. I would like to elaborate on point one, and lack of education. As a Tantra coach, I conduct those live streams very frequently, and I once we're discussing something related to promiscuity, and someone made a couple of guys started exchanging on the size and then the morphology of female intimate body parts, talking about tunnels, talking about deformities due to the number of partners. And that was so striking to me because I realized how uneducated and how completely clueless men appear to be, even men who are interested in the topic of relationships. They appear to be totally clueless about the basics of female body, the basics of female sexuality. And that is owing as well to how femininity in general and womanhood have been submitted to a myth, how they've been regarded as something so sacred and esoteric that it is really hard for certain people to connect with it. And we're not even talking about men who struggle to connect and understand what woman constitutes, what female sexuality, what female physiology represent. It is also women themselves who are often in rejection of their own body, rejection of their own physical needs, and are completely unaware of how they function. And that is a social problem as well, the existing myth of femininity that on the one hand creates enigma. Hello, GCA, nice to see you. That on the one hand creates enigma around a woman, this appealing, some like pink glittery fog around the concept of a woman. At the same time, it's something scary. At the same time, it's something that is habitually exploited in some weird way. At the same time, something that causes to have so many unclear emotions. And at the same time, something that is stigmatized and looked down upon as something inferior, that is also regarded not as human, not as humane, but as something other than humane. It creates this absolutely unhealthy perception of a woman, creating the abyss in the minds of people, that there is some mystery, that there is some cryptic language that we need to use to establish intergender communication, that there is some code of conduct that we need to follow mandatorily to shape something that will resemble relationships that we read about in some novels written by people who shape the myth. It's such a nonsense if you think about it, if you zoom out and you look at it from the outside, if you take it for face value. To what extent people are unable to touch the grass in the topic of male-female relationships. Just America, what would you say is the percent of men are lonely? I have no idea. Nash Wansurbum? Oh, the chosen one. Which one? Hello, Thunder Circus. Hi. Did you receive the slides? Maybe alien. So, men, on the one hand, are sitting there and like earning for a partner, earning for a woman in their life, and at the same time, they giggle about female sexuality and female nature, female psychology, if we can actually attribute it to some genders, which we probably cannot largely. Because there is this rooted myth of it. But this myth of femininity inevitably is a part of the overall myth of a gender, which also affects the self-perception of men, that they are something performative, that they must be something fulfilling some objectives, fulfilling some social expectations, fulfilling some fairy tale that is established by some invisible authority that no one can even name or appoint. So it's an authority that exists in the minds of people, that sets those harsh limitations and inability to allow both men and women to integrate very important parts of their psyche, to connect with their body and approach them with respect. This is, I think, the core of this problem, this myth. And this myth, it leads to rigidity. The world is changing. The biggest forte of a human is adaptability. It is ability to think creatively, ability to find solutions for problems and survive in various scenarios that are abundant in nature. This is the forte of a human. The moment humans adopt a myth, be it religious myth, which is still, again, archaic mythology from like thousands of years ago, they're still living in human minds, despite any discoveries, despite the access to any library in the world, despite, again, having this most supreme computer, they're still driven by the archaic myth. And this myth that's placed instead of the necessary drive for curiosity, exploration, reasonability, pursuit of one's desires, getting to know oneself, pursuit of the cravings of the body and mind and intellectual cravings, it's an insane limitation. A human who lives, who chooses to hold on to a concept, devoids themselves of natural process of exploring the world of curiosity, breathing life in and out freely. It's impossible. And adoption, like early adoption of this myth, is what leads to establishment of the system in which a human ends up being depreciated, has a crisis of self-worth, and the system in which the human is just very exhausted. The West is people on antidepressants. The West is people with insanely low level of energy. The West is people in which 25-year-olds are drained, exhausted. It's unheard of. And this low level of vitality is a consequence of living against one's personal nature, living against one's personal desires and needs consistently. Every year, there's more and more and more numbness, and at the same time, there is more and more and more unaddressed issues. How can a person who is incredibly drained in life, who is living in the ever-tightening survival mode, going to entertain social interactions? Add to it the digitalization of our life, in which the brain does not get the healthy stimulus and rest, and instead that prevents people from even thinking calmly. The level of anxiety is horrendous. Which adequate social interactions, sense of belonging, is going to be possible? the degeneration in general, the degeneration of a human, the value of a human, the value of life, after it has been submitted to a myth, basically slavery shaping myth of that the human must pursue worth through contributing to society in some way. This is a super powerful slave master manipulation that's seeded into people's minds. That idea is why humans are in a deep crisis. Because there is in general the concept of your worth. You are not just taught to experience life. This skill is not nurtured in kids, this skill is not nurtured in humans. Instead, humans are taught to think in the notion of their worth. Their social capital, their net worth, how much money they're bringing, how much they're contributing to the society. But you cannot just tell freely to people to the question, what do you do? You cannot just tell them, I live life. I live life. I'm a human, I live life. You can't. No, I mean, you can, of course, but it's not going to be understood because it's not the part of social code. Because you, as a human, will likely be regarded through the prism of how much you make and what value you bring to society. And the funny thing here is that the society is also a very abstract thing. The society is an incredibly abstract thing. If you ask me, what is society? Define me as society. Show me what is society. Most people won't be able to identify what this society is. It's an abstract, out there concept. So this mythology that drives human existence, instead of the propagation of culture of experiencing life, or at least balancing that paradigm with the training of how to experience life, is where this comes from, and a lot of other social phenomena that are quite unfavorable for the individual. Can't stay long, but always want to wish happy stream. Thank you, Ruben, so much. The Great Om, hello. Yeah, it's called money. If everybody had money, everybody would be in a relationship or married no matter what you look like. WT about female. Do you know there is more number of female than male? Sure. It's also age. There are different age brackets as well. Today's topic is, what's up with the internet today? I don't know. It's just like keeps going. Leslie Byram, hello. Money, effing, what's up with, I want to stream, I want to work, I don't know why. Today, internet is just sabotage. The most supreme, I didn't have